Okay, so are we ready to go?
We are.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. It's Friday, January 15th, 8:30, and this is a meeting of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. We are meeting this, we have been meeting this week with different operating areas to check in first and foremost on how the pandemics affected them in the last 9 months, and to learn more about adjustments you've made, any kind of financial pressures that have come out of it, and then to basically do the same thing looking forward to the coming year. Who knows, maybe it's another 9 months or something like that, but we just want to know, would like to come up to speed on where things have been and then see what you're anticipating and if there's any kind of helpful role that the legislature can play in helping your areas respond to the strange new world we're all living in these days. So with that, good morning, Commissioner Porter and team.
Good morning. So I just will briefly outline my plan here and make sure it works for you, Mr. Chairman, and for the committee.
Sure.
The Fish and Wildlife Department, I'm proud to say, I think it has taken advantage of a bad situation in COVID and turned it to the best use we could, made the best we could out of it. And that covers several areas. And among them, operationally, obviously, it's been a huge change for us. In terms of our interactions with the public, it's been a significant change in terms of going to online hunter education, online big game reporting, online trainings and seminars of various kinds. But I thought I'd first go to the CARES Act, portion of the CARES Act funding that we received for improving public access. And I have with me Mark Scott, who's the Director of Wildlife, John Austin, who's the head of our Lands and Habitat Program, and Mike Wachowski, who oversees both our access areas and was in charge of developing the Fish and Wildlife app, which we developed as part of our COVID response. So if it works for you, what I'd like to do is turn it over to John and Mike to go through a brief PowerPoint on the public access aspect of our work, which was about $1.5 million. This is money that we had to get out the door and on the ground in very short time, a couple of months really. And these projects could not be begun before, they could not have been in the works before COVID. So we had to come up with, plan, permit, and execute these projects in a very short period of time. And then Mark and I will talk about some of the other aspects of COVID and how it's impacted the department, and then like to have a discussion. Does that work for you?
Yes, thanks very much. I think that sounds like a good strategy, and thanks for welcome to all your members of your team, and thanks for coming over to work with us this morning.
Our pleasure, and I always like to bring some folks who know what they're talking about to balance. So, I'm going to share my screen, and I'll ask. I think John is up first, and then Mike, and we'll go through this fairly quickly. But I just want to give a sense of some of these access projects that we've done. So I'm notoriously bad at this, but
They all have permission to share their screen. So if you want to turn it over to them to do that.
I think, are you able to see this slideshow now?
Yes.
Terrific. Terrific. So I will run these slides, but I'll in a minute I'll turn it over to John to start talking about these projects. But just an overview of how we spent that 1.6 million across the state and across the portion, the different areas of our department. You can see here, and I'll turn it over to John now if I could. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Porter, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you some of the great work that our colleagues in the department were able to pull together in really quite short order to take advantage of the CARES Act funds and use it as an opportunity as the commissioner mentioned earlier, sort of making lemonade out of lemons, given the circumstances, to make some significant improvements for safe public access to wildlife management areas. So we have 100 wildlife management areas around the state. They're from north to south and east to west. We have a fair bit of infrastructure on all of those properties: roads, parking areas, gates, kiosks, trails, some buildings and other structures. So every year there's a fair bit of capital investment that goes into maintaining these properties. This year we turned our attention and were able to, and essentially in the course of 4 or 5 months, put a substantial amount of CARES Act funds on the ground to improve trails, roads, parking facilities, and signage. This was all carefully coordinated within our department. My colleague, Mr. Wakrowski, who's on in the meeting this morning, he and I worked very closely together on a lot of these projects because he did similar work with fishing access areas and other things. And we worked very closely with our colleagues in the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation so that we were sure that, in particular with developing signs and conveying messages and information to the public regarding the use of public lands during the pandemic, that the messages were consistent and clear. So just
Mr. Austin?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can I ask just a quick question? So I know that I'm just trying to understand a little bit sort of the basic thinking behind CARES dollars going into this sort of infrastructure. I mean, I'm delighted with all the investments and the improvements. Was the thinking that more people are going to be outdoors using public recreation? So that was the nexus. The public needs to be able to get outside, get healthy, safe exercise. So you're improving places they can go. Is that the connection there?
Well, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you asking sort of the question that's fundamental to how we made the decision to apply these funds. You are absolutely correct. What we were seeing, not just assuming, but actually seeing on the ground, and I'm sure you and your colleagues have seen similar instances. Our public lands were not being overwhelmed, but certainly being used to a much greater extent this spring, this summer, and this fall, given the COVID circumstances, than we're typically accustomed to. So we wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to make sure that people had sufficient space to park and to move around on the landscape in a way that enabled them to feel safe, keep socially distant, that sort of thing. Yep.
Great. Thank you.
And I would just add, if I could, that we also wanted to make people able to know about and to use areas that maybe they weren't using and that might get less use than typical. So we were trying to get information out and trying to get access to new places for people so they could spread out. We also had some amount of damage from the significant amount of use in the spring. We tried to get areas open and accessible maybe earlier than we would have in some cases, to make sure that people had places to go and to be outside and to be away from each other, frankly. Thanks.
Right. I know I was at Mount Philo a few times, and it was a very different experience than the normal visit. It was like, I mean, it was great, and there was plenty of space to spread out, but it was like going to an amusement park. There were so many people going in and out at the same time. It was, so it's great that we had that resource available.
Absolutely, and Mount Philo was not unique in that regard. A lot of our state lands were receiving a very high level of use this past year, as a result of people perhaps having more time, but certainly having a greater degree of interest in spending time outdoors and engaging in healthy activities. So that really was what we were trying to support and enhance using the CARES Act funds. And as a good segue from your comments, Commissioner Porter, the photos in this slide here illustrate some improved access for anglers to the Barton River and the Black River. For those of you familiar with those rivers in the Northeast Kingdom that flow into Lake Memphremagog, These are very popular fisheries in the spring when steelhead rainbow trout migrate up them. So popular that at times you have anglers standing shoulder to shoulder, engaged in fishing and the pursuit of those steelhead. So we used it as an opportunity to try and provide improved, safe access to just spread people out a little bit more and make sure that they were able to access the river more effectively. Next slide, please. This is a slide illustrating some of the signage that was installed. This isn't illustrating the safety signage, which was installed essentially at all wildlife management areas on all of our kiosks, but it's an illustration of some additional signage that we installed to enhance the user experience, in this case at Snake Mountain Wildlife Management Area in the town of Addison. This, like Mount Philo, is a very popular hiking destination. It receives a great deal of use, and this year even more so. So in an attempt to both spread people out, but also make sure that they were getting a very positive experience, we improved the signage and information at that WMA. The next slide, please. Great. So here's one illustration amongst many. This is where the lion's share of the CARES Act funds went to for WMA access improvements. When I say I apologize, I really don't tend to talk in acronyms. When I say WMA, I mean wildlife management areas. This is an illustration of how we've improved and expanded parking access and the access road itself to Lewis Creek Wildlife Management Area in the town of Starksboro. We improved access to essentially 25 wildlife management areas, and they were distributed throughout the state. So there was no one part of the state that received a high degree of attention. It was equitably distributed from north to south and east to west. So all parts of the state received the benefits of this funding. And again, this is just an illustration of a lot of what we did. I was estimating that we improved roughly 25 to 30 miles of access road on wildlife management areas, and many parking areas were improved and expanded so that people could safely access these areas. The next slide, please. This is some trail access improvements up at Bill Sladek Wildlife Management Area. This is in the towns of Norton and Holland in the Northeast Kingdom. This is a fairly large piece of property. It's nearly 10,000 acres, very popular destination for hunters, but also for hikers and wildlife watchers. It's a great place to go if you want to look for moose, for instance. We have a large network of roads and trails on this wildlife management area, and there was a need for some significant improvements, especially given the degree of use that we were seeing up here on this property this year. Much higher use on some of our wildlife management areas in the Northeast Kingdom than we're typically accustomed to, and not just from hunters. There were a lot of people out just having a walk, doing a brisk hike, or looking for wildlife. So these funds were a terrific benefit to make some long needed improvements there. Next slide, please. Great. That wraps up my portion of the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'll turn it over to Mike for the second part of this. Thanks.
Thanks, John and Commissioner Porter. So what we've already been talking about is the point that there are a lot of people out on the landscape due to COVID. And this is a mixture of people wanting to find just basically activities to get out of their homes. Also, you know, there weren't opportunities for people to go to bowling alleys or movie theaters or restaurants for the most part. So a safe alternative for a lot of Vermonters, and not just Vermonters, but around the country, was to get out on public land and seek out those activities that maybe they haven't had time for in the previous, 5 or 10 years. And we saw that in the increase in fishing and hunting license sales as well. So one of our ideas was, let's help people find some places that maybe they weren't so familiar with. And the best way we felt to do that was to put our website essentially in their hands. So when they are out driving around looking for places to go to hike or hunt or fish or just recreate, they were able to find some of those places on their mobile devices. So we created what I found out yesterday is the first state of Vermont mobile app. I did not realize this, but there's no other state agencies out there that have a mobile app. So here's just a few pictures of what the app, some of the pages look like. So the idea here was to get information to the user so that if they go to a place and it's overrun with people, which we found, and it sounds like some of you on the committee have also found as you go out to try and recreate, there are a lot of people out there, amusement park type atmospheres. So some people might not feel comfortable going to that location, and so with a mobile device they can use the app to find, you know, maybe another close a place that's close by, or an alternative activity to do. Next slide. So we provided things like family-friendly fishing opportunities, you know, to go out with your family. Maybe school is remote and you don't have school that day, and so families can get out together and be together and do some fun activities. Some of the other things that you can do, you can buy your licenses. There are a variety of maps that you can explore to try and find wildflower hikes and our wildlife management areas, our fishing access areas. There's an opportunity to report a variety of different things to the department. You have at your fingertips the ability to look up hunting and fishing regulations. So say you want to go to a stream and there's a lot of people there and you want to go, okay, let's find an alternative location, but you might not be familiar with that location. You can easily look up the fishing within the Fishing Law Digest to find out what the creel limits might be for that specific location, so that you don't have to go home and kind of recalibrate where to go next. So the mobile app is out. It was out as of November 23rd, which I think was the Monday before Thanksgiving. And it'll continually be updated and improved as we move along. Some of the next things we're looking to do are allow people to find through, you know, whatever mapping device they have on their mobile app or their phone, is they'll be able to map to their current location to find big game reporting stations or fishing access area parking lots, or maybe bait fish stations or bait fish dealers in the middle of winter. So they'll be able to find how to get to places a lot more easily as we continue to develop this app in the future, in the coming months. Next slide. So some of the other work that I completed.
Sorry to interrupt. I didn't know if if we're moving on from the app. Just a quick question.
Sure.
What kind of response have you seen in terms of downloads or feedback or any of that kind of stuff?
As of Monday, I think we had around 5,200 downloads. So over roughly not quite 2 months, we've had 52 downloads. We've had a handful of people from Canada and Mexico, strangely enough, download this, but most of the downloads have come from the United States. And the rating that we had received on the Apple App Store was a 4.4. So we feel there's been some positive feedback, and we're continually taking any constructive criticism or input from the public and staff to try and continually improve this.
Great. Well, congratulations on on having the state's first mobile app out there in quick order.
Yes,
Mr.
thank
Chair?
you. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, what does
Yes.
it mean to have a 4.4 rating? I mean, on a scale of 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 5, or what's being rated?
Sorry, that is out of a 1 to 5. It's a star rating, so you can give the app a 1 through 5 star rating, and so the average rating is a 4.4 out of 5. So it indicates that we're doing well. People like the app, and I feel that's a good thing. But we're not going to rest on our laurels. We're going to continue to improve and provide additional features
Thank you. I just wondered what, I didn't understand the measurement, you know.
Sorry about that. It's okay. I'll move on.
Please, thanks.
So the other aspect of work that the department had done was improving fishing access areas. We have nearly 200 around the state, and these areas provide critical access to Vermont's waters. And we are continually working to improve access for boating and fishing, but we don't always have the funds to complete these projects. So we had some ideas of projects that needed to get done, but just weren't able to quite complete them. But once the CARES funding was made available, we made quick work of obtaining some permits and getting some contracts. And we had done 3 different dredging projects, which essentially is taking an excavator and digging out boat ramps that maybe have become silted in due to wind and wave action or from people power loading their boats, which essentially is, instead of driving them up onto their trailers and winching them onto their trailers, they kind of throttle up and it causes some lake bed disturbance that can create some issues with the end of the boat ramps. So we completed 2 projects on Lake Champlain and 1 at an interior pond in Washington County. Next slide. So some other projects we had completed were, on the right is Allen Point, which is, the department own the northern end of the Island Line bike path, as most people know it, but it's a causeway that stretches across the mouth of Mallett's Bay on Lake Champlain. And so if you're in South Hero, this causeway projects to the south, and you're actually looking south in that kind of island in front of you is the northern portion of the Colchester Causeway. And we had a fishing platform at the southern end of this causeway, but it's at an elevation that oftentimes ends up being inundated by high lake levels in the spring, and it ends up being washed out around the fishing platform. And it really was unsafe and not easily accessible by most people. So we ended up putting in about a 30-foot gangway that gets us from the higher elevation of the surface of the causeway down to that fishing platform. So you can park and walk out to the fishing platform, and it is now fully ADA accessible. So all people, all mobility capabilities can get out to this fishing platform, and it's a very popular site. On the left-hand side is Mallett's Bay access area, and we have as far as I know, the largest access area on Lake Champlain. And again, in Mallett's Bay in Colchester. And we had 2 large docks that really needed some work done to them due to some ice damage, and we weren't able to get around to doing that work. So here it's the dock manufacturer has come back and is putting in 2 longer, more robust anchors on shore that will allow just more usability throughout the boating season for boaters by allowing the docks to move a lot more freely. And they will also be 100% ADA accessible come this spring. Next slide. So we had 2 parking lot projects where we had already had them paved, and paving is a pricey endeavor, and it's not something that we typically jump on, but because of the CARES funding, we're able to repave 2 of our parking areas, one on the Connecticut River, the Hoyt's Landing access in Springfield, and this one in St. Albans Bay on Hathaway Point Road in St. Albans. And we essentially repave these sites and then restripe them, and we tried to increase the amount of parking through a new striping plan, provided accessible parking. So here you see a picture of accessible parking with some accessible toilet units, and across the road where the car is located is the dock and the ramp and dock. And so we not only fixed the parking lot, got rid of potholes and deteriorated pavement, but we also increased the capacity. This is one of our most popular access areas on Lake Champlain, and we were getting a lot of complaints this summer just due to the number of people utilizing the site and kind of utilizing it improperly by the regular users. They know kind of the ins and outs and the way people are supposed to access this parking lot. And there was a lot of frustration because new users really didn't kind of know the typical flow of traffic. So we have put a bunch of different signage on the pavement and just signs to kind of help people utilize the parking in a better way. Next slide. So that's the end of the
That's it.
slide. Sorry, I just want to throw out one more thing, Commissioner Porter. So overall, the Access program completed 3 ramp improvement projects. You saw the 1 dock and fishing platform projects. And then we had 9 parking lot improvement projects. And then there were another 9 fishing or paddling access projects, which Mr. Austin had touched on briefly at the beginning of his presentation. So thank you for the time, and turn it over to Commissioner Porter.
Great,
Thanks
thank
very
you.
much.
So that's the public access portion. Any questions on that part of our COVID response? And if not, I'll go into the other aspects.
Sure. I do have a question, Commissioner. So the how does the extra money that came out of CARES compare to your normal budget for that kind of work? I mean, was it an extra 20% or 2% or, you know, in terms of allowing you to take on?
Yeah, I would defer to Mike and John, but my rough guess would be that it would be about double what we'd normally spend on these kind of projects. So we did our normal work and maybe that much work again.
Senator Bray, the Access program spends about $900,000 a year, and this includes probably about $650,000 to $700,000 of your routine operation and maintenance. So this is mowing, picking up trash, installing docks, putting out portable toilets, snow plowing in the winter for ice fishing. And then we usually have about $200,000 for infrastructure projects. We did that this year, and there was about $850,000 of that. And then we spent another $700,000 on infrastructure projects specifically with CARES funding. And so it really allowed us to chip away at a huge backlog of projects that we kind of had on a list of, geez, it'd be nice to get these done, but really don't have the funding to do. So it was a huge help to really provide the funding to allow us to get the projects done, to allow the public to utilize the public lands in a safe and efficient manner. And it also helped struggling contractors that really were out of work early in the spring to really get back and do some great work with us. So there's also a kind of an economic stimulus there as well, I think, for a lot of small contractors.
Great.
I
Thanks
would
very
say
much.
similarly, I think Commissioner Porter, your estimate of spending roughly double what we typically would on capital investments is accurate. We typically spend anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000 a year on capital improvements on wildlife management areas, and so this was effectively double that. And to that point, dealing with our contract process and planning and coordinating capital investment work like this, it's a lot of work for our staff who have other responsibilities as well. So the fact that they were able to respond so quickly and get this work done in the short time frame that they had was really remarkable. And my hat's off to them.
To be honest, we accepted the money and I sort of thought, well, we won't be able to get all these projects done. We'll be turning some of this money back in again to be redistributed. And we were able to get them all done. So we're very grateful for that.
Oh, congratulations. And, it
Thanks.
reminds me that you're really in the customer service business. And I don't know that people necessarily think of, these areas as that kind of facility, but it's great. You can make improvements.
Yeah, we sell opportunities to have experiences is really what we offer. And this was a huge help in providing that to people.
Okay, great.
So I'll go on and talk briefly about other aspects if that suits you and if we have time.
Yeah, I don't see any committee questions, so let's march
Great.
along. Thank you.
So basically, in short, every aspect of the department's work was impacted and touched by COVID in one way or another. And the unfortunate part of that was we had to cancel a number of things. For instance, the conservation camps, our fishing festival, various other events and opportunities, seminars that we do, we had to cancel. So that was too bad. We really worked hard to try to figure out a way to operate the conservation camps, knowing that, you know, those kids, those 1,000 kids would be unlikely to find another week camp to do this summer. But we just could not figure out a way to do it in a COVID safe way. We also, of course, had to change operationally. Get all of our staff set up to work from home, to work remotely, do our public hearings that we do, and I'm grateful to the legislature for working with us in the spring to make it possible for us to do those public hearings remotely, and as well as doing our board and endangered species committee meetings remotely. And then we had to also change our operations in terms of the facing part of those and how we interact with the public in hunter education, in big game reporting, and in other ways. So it made a huge change in our operations. I think it ultimately, I think we learned a lot about ways to do some of these activities more efficiently and more effectively, and certainly on the public hearings, I think we heard from people that we probably would not have heard from in a traditional public hearing that you had to drive to get to. So that was all to the positive, at least, or at least a silver lining to a dark cloud. We also had a lot of changes in our field work and the work of our biologists. Certain types of field work we weren't able to do. We had needed to suspend. Other types we needed to modify how we did them in order to get those projects still to go along at least at a base level. Of course, and Mark can go into this more if the committee is interested. Of course, we also had a lot of work to do with our biologists and with other states in terms of, you know, this is a zoonotic disease, and we wanted to make sure that our responses and our processes were in place to deal with those types of diseases, and also to make sure that we weren't at risk of reverse zoonosis, where COVID could go back into a wild population from an infected person. So that changed our biological work. And as you can imagine, the wardens around the state who are sworn, fully trained and sworn law enforcement officers with the same powers as state police, their work changed quite significantly. We wanted to minimize in-person contact between wardens and the public, except where absolutely necessary, to protect both the warden service and also to protect the public. We also were available to help in various types of ways with the wardens to respond to the pandemic and to respond to the crisis, including.
Mr. Commissioner, sorry, can I jump in there just to
Sure,
ask a
of
quick
course.
question? So can you say something? I'm hoping that you have good news generally, but how did your staff come through this in terms of health?
Very well. We did have a couple of scares with folks at the department who had been exposed, but I don't believe we had a single confirmed case among our staff. I don't believe we had one, and so we had a couple of, you know, people who had cases within their families, people who were in contact with people who had it, but not within our staff. And Mike is reminding me that I should also mention we did not have the DOC work crews this summer to help out in our access maintenance and other types of maintenance. They're a huge help to us and do this work. And so we really were shorthanded in that way. VTrans came forward and provided us some help. I have to say, I'm incredibly proud to say wardens stepped up and did some access area maintenance and cleanup as part of their duties, which is not in their normal book of work, but they stepped up and did it, knowing that we were so shorthanded. Obviously, in addition, the increased hunting and fishing activity and the increased use of public land, both our land and Forest Parks and Rec land, also put a need for the wardens to respond, both in terms of just general fish and wildlife law and enforcement, as well as enforcing COVID safety and COVID appropriate behavior on public land. And then I've mentioned the hunter education and conservation camps, but also within our education and outreach section, we do a lot of seminars, field visits, field walks with biologists and others. And we've done the best we can do to move many of those things online, knowing that people are really eager and hungrier than ever to learn about the outdoors, to learn about the environment, and to participate in those activities. So we've moved as many of those as we can online. For instance, we just did a virtual fishing not tournament, but seminar, where you're going to be able to virtually go around to different stations, kind of like we do at our ice fishing festival, and see different aspects of fishing on the ice and learn different things about that activity. So I think overall we've come through quite well, learned quite a bit, and we are going to apply those lessons as we go forward. I would just ask Mark to add anything or correct anything in that from his vantage point.
Wow, you really nailed it, Commissioner. I think two key messages, and I'll just add two. We closed the Dead Creek Visitor Center, which is down in your area. That was kind of a hardship to us. We did that kind of at the last minute. We were hoping maybe we could allow a couple people in there, but we're working now on an outdoor nature interpretive trail with a viewing platform. So if this COVID continues longer or we deal with other pandemic restrictions, we'll have an outside opportunity for people, even more enhanced than the current Snow Goose visitation place that people can see waterfall along Route 17. Two real things I would say is I appreciate your question on staff. I think the stress level on all staff was incredibly high in the first few months. I think it's subsided now somewhat to some degree, especially when staff is dealing with the unknown that we all dealt with. I think fortunately we all still got a paycheck because of COVID relief and the benefits. Even if they had to stay at home work for children, they were compensated, so they didn't see any loss in their wage. The stress they were dealing with was just like all of us, with elder parents, having kids at home, exposure, the unknown. I personally got to give hats off to Secretary Julie Moore and three commissioners, including our commissioner, that met daily, sometimes twice a day. I know I was involved trying to help out a little bit during that period. The amount of time these people spent trying to deal with this from mid-March on is a little bit mind-boggling to me, and almost blew me away, because I've never witnessed that in my long-term career. How much the administration spent and took this serious and sent out daily, if not twice a day, messages to staff. Because when you deal with unknowns, that's when the stress kicks in. I think now we're in a more of a stable situation. I think overall, my assessment is in the short term, we came through this in remarkable colors, and I think that's all divisions in the department. I think the commissioner, I'm glad he mentioned the silver lining, because we learned new things on how to reach people that we never reach through this pandemic crisis. An example, we did a public meeting on our big game plan, our 10-year big game plan. We had close to 100 people participating. I would dare say when the last time we did that 10 years ago, we had a half a dozen people show up at the public hearing. So we're able to reach people who we never get to reach, whether it's elderly, they don't come to public meetings, through to do that. I think in the future, and I'm glad you asked that question, if we had to go through another year with these tight restrictions, I think we'd start seeing some concerns. But I think overall, I think, we look at the glass half full, and I think we remarkably gained an awful lot through this whole exercise. But hope it doesn't continue. But that's my thoughts, Commissioner.
Thank you. I'll add too, I think in some ways we were maybe not better prepared, but maybe more used to working like this than some departments, because we're spread out across the entire state. We have dozens of locations where people work, and many people work in the field or work remotely in any case in normal times. So
Mhm.
I think we were a little bit had a little bit of an advantage in that way. Thank you.
Okay. Well, you know, on behalf of the committee and, you know, from a legislator that's worked with you for years, thank you very much for all your hard work. And I know that everywhere I look, I see people who are putting in extra hours to make things happen. No one is sticking to their normal hours or their job description. It's like, it's a pretty
Right.
can-do attitude all the way around. Like I have yet to hear, that's not my job in the last 9 months, you know? So thanks so much for doing it. And I'm glad that your staff came through healthy. So the silver lining I'm thinking of in part is that, you know, we've talked for years about the level of funding for fish and wildlife work and wildlife management areas. And because so much of your revenue is dependent on licenses and the federal funds related to ammunition and stuff like that, you know, sort of, but there's a large user population that I think the number of people who appreciate the resource you're offering is growing. And I think that presents an opportunity to help maintain or maybe improve funding, you know, the more people appreciate what's there, the more we may be able to improve the situation. So
That's exactly right, Mr. Chairman, and I think that extends. That's certainly true. We've seen an increase in hunting and fishing participation this year, so that gives us the opportunity to engage more people, and maybe later on in the weeks to come, we'll talk more about how we are attempting to keep those folks engaged in those activities. But it's also those hikers and bird watchers and wildlife watchers and others who and paddlers who access the water or the land through our facilities or through our properties. It's both sides of the equation, and it is a silver lining, and we do welcome it.
great. I see Senator McCormick has a question.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The term wildlife management, Mr. Commissioner, you and I have talked about this before, that in a way it's sort of a misnomer. We don't manage wildlife. Wildlife manages itself just fine without us. What we manage is people. We manage the human interaction with wildlife. And I think you and your shop do a great job of that. And I thank you for that. But it does seem to me that there is a point at which there are simply too many people wanting to get into our wilder areas. And even if they're well behaved, there are just too many of them. What is the tipping point? What do you have any notion of what you're going to do? Because I think actually this summer probably we were already there in certain, like Mount Philo, for example. How do we handle just too many people?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's something we talk about with our Forest Parks and Rec colleagues quite a bit, as you can imagine. I don't think we're at the too many people stage yet, but I think we are at we need to make sure people are spreading out in where they go and make sure that people are utilizing all of the areas available to them for different activities and not just the ones that they know best or that are closest to them. And I think that part of this COVID effort has been to do that. We're lucky in Vermont to have huge areas of wild land, whether it's the what we manage or whether it's the Green Mountain National Forest or the National Wildlife Refuge. We have a huge tracts of open land. It's getting people to not all go to Snake Mountain or not all go to Mount Philo that is tricky, and not all go to Camel's Hump and maybe hike a peak that's maybe less well known, but would be interesting for them to learn about. And I guess I would say we haven't cracked the nut on that yet, but we're working on it.
I mean, one of the challenges with Mount Philo is that there you are, right on the southern edge of like Chittenden County. And so it's sort of the first, whatever, wild area you get to, and it's an easy trip. And it's for a short hike, you get a fabulous view when you get up there. So,
Yeah, and the same goes for Snake Mountain. Similar aspect, similar attributes.
Yep. Senator Campion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 3 quick questions. I'd like a quick update on May. I'd like to know how she's doing. I'd like to know if you wouldn't mind giving a map at some point or some information on how each of our districts might have received CARES funding. And then, Commissioner, at some point, I'm going to just give you a heads up. I'm going to forward you this email. You gave me some information on the boat ramp area on Shoreham a while ago, and some constituents of ours that were struggling with it. And I'm just going to give you a heads up. I'm going to re-forward with a couple of questions, but I would love to hear about May, and I'd love to know if we're getting, if I could say to my constituents, hey, here's some CARES funds that have come down this way.
Yeah, May is great. She's just about walking, eating everything in sight. Next time I'm testifying in your committee, I'll bring her on for a second so you can see her.
Sounds good.
She's great. We can certainly get a breakdown of the public access money by county.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Happy to do that. And then your third question, yes, the Shoreham. If you would forward that to me, we'll respond directly to them with all the information we have and copy you on it if that works.
That'd be great. Thank you, Commissioner.
Sure, happy to do it. Thank you.
Commissioner, I wanted to double back. I know that early on you were seeing a lot more licenses, which was and sales in the spring. And there was a question as to whether or not that was an early surge and then it would peter out, or can you say something about where you wrapped up the year?
Yeah, it continued through the year on both the hunting and fishing side. We had strong years. I think on the hunting side, we ended up about, this is a round number because obviously we sell a lot of different types of licenses and tags, but in the neighborhood of 20% up from the previous year. So we're grateful for that, both for people participating and also, of course, for the revenue. We are trying we are instituting a plan to try to keep those folks engaged in those activities in 20, hoping to do that. I think one of the things we learned was for many people, it's just a question of time, having the time to do it. And this year for unpleasant, unhappy circumstances, many people had more time. They also, of course, wanted to be outside, and that was an activity that they could do away from other people or with the people within their household. And I think also there were, concerns about supply chains and desire for people to control where their own food comes from. And I think that contributed as well. But we are going to try. I suspect that at least some of those folks, as they go back to work full time, as we return to normal, hopefully in the next 6 months or so, we'll see that some of those folks will drop off. We had for the first year a novice hunting weekend that ran concurrently with youth weekend, in which anybody could hunt during what had been the youth weekend, provided it was their first year hunting. We expected a couple hundred folks. I think we ended up with about 1,100. And I think about 62% women who participated in that novice weekend. So we are encouraged by that and happy to see that.
Great. And do you get age information as well when you get the novice hunters in? Is it a younger cohort?
Yes, much younger than our traditional hunting population, and in most people in their 20s and 30s, or many of them in their 20s and 30s.
Okay, great. And I haven't, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at House Resolution 133 or what you're hearing from DC, but are you anticipating that there'll be another round of special money flowing to the state that will include opportunities for Fish and Wildlife to continue to do chip away at your project list or other enhancements?
We hope so, and I think expect so. We don't know the answer to that yet, but we are sort of starting to gather together potential projects and figure out what the capacity for using it would be. I think that the need to make room for people to get outside is going to continue through this year, and so we would like to do that and like to do additional projects of this kind.
Great. Well, my hope is I see so many more people out and about on trails around Bristol that I hope it becomes a lifelong habit for a lot of people, including me keeping it up as well.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, great. Are there any other committee questions for the commissioner and our Fish and Wildlife team here today? I have one quick question. Mr. Austin, is your family from Brattleboro area?
No, they're not, sir.
All right, just checking. I knew a John Austin and who's a cousin who's from Brattleboro. So Senator
there's
Campion
a
has
lot of
cousins statewide. I'm just trying to catch up a little bit. He has like thousands of cousins. It doesn't matter where you are.
You can't compete. When half the family arrived here in 1760, I mean, they're everywhere. You should see the Christmas list.
All right. If you don't have anything more you want to share with us, then thanks very much for visiting with us. Good to see you all again, and thanks for your work over the last 9 months.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
All right. So committee, we're going to shift gears. And I just wanted to, our counsel, Ellen Schakowsky, has joined us with very little notice. I just wanted to make sure that we got, so we're not going to have a walkthrough or anything like that of the executive order. I just wanted to make sure everyone got a copy of it, and then we'll schedule time next week to dig into it. So good morning, Ms. Schakowsky.
Good morning.
And does Jude now have that EO?
She does. I don't know if she's been able to post it yet.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I can't post it because
Right, when you're hosting
right now. So
yeah. So if Jude, when we wrap up for the morning, if you could post it and just email it to members of the committee, that
I
would
can
be helpful.
email it now, but I'll post after the meeting.
Okay, great. And so I thought we would go through that with you next week, Ms. Schakowsky, and we'll work on schedule. I don't know if, do you have a sense of, is this something you'd have enough time to prepare for Tuesday or Wednesday, or is more the latter half of the week seem likely? Just
the latter half would be preferable.
okay.
But yes, it would be preferable.
Right.
But I know your schedule. There's potentially a 90-day window you're working with here, so time is
right
of the essence.
Right. I'm feeling a little that shot clock pressure now that we have the 90-day clock running, which I think you said it expires on April 14th. Right. Yeah. Maybe so without asking you to do more than you're prepared to do, can you just remind the committee a little bit about how this works and things we might keep in mind as we read the order, like in terms of to what degree does this implement? Is this a straightforward thing, or is it a bit of a stretch, in terms of what a governor can or cannot do in terms of reorganization?
So I need some more time to fully realize what is going on in Executive Order 2-21. the governor issued the executive order yesterday afternoon, so I haven't even had it for 24 hours yet. But it is proposing a reorganization of the Natural Resources Board. But it is also proposing a restructuring of the permitting process. So I can talk to you about some of the actual text of the proposal. I haven't finished my legal analysis yet, but there
Well,
is.
I don't want to ask you to do more than you're really
Sure.
prepared to do. So, especially since we're all just getting the thing. So, I just thought. So the basic framing for it is, an EO can be issued in the first 15 days of a session that does a reorganization. That's already a statutory provision.
Right. In Title III, Chapter 41, there is a statute, 3 VSA 2002, which does allow a governor to reorganize executive branch agencies by executive order. So that statute allows the legislature to disapprove by resolution of either body within 90 days. And the text of that statute does specifically refer to reorganization of an executive branch agency. The text of the executive order does a few things. Do you want me to put it up on the screen, or would you like me to just give the bullet points?
Sure. If you can pop it up on the screen. And again, I don't want you to be trying to do more analysis work on the fly than you're ready to do. So
no, but I think I can talk you through just the bullet points of what the proposal is.
Sure. Great.
So last year, your committee did work on an Act 250 bill, H926, and what is in the text of the executive order is very close to what was in the administration's proposal for 926 that was in the House. So I don't believe that your committee actually reviewed that proposal because it was not passed out of the House. But it is not it is a proposal that I have seen before. So
okay. And can I check in a quick history question? So my recollection is that it was part of the bill when the bill left Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife. The bill went to Ways and Means, and Ways and Means didn't approve. And subsequent to that, the bill was brought to the floor without this section. Is that right?
Yes, you're testing my memory though, because after it went to Ways and Means, it also went to appropriations.
Oh, okay.
I think the Ways and Means amendment took out the board, but it might have been the appropriations amendment.
Okay.
So
it wasn't the Committee of
money.
Jurisdiction removing it. It was money committees taking a look. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Senator
I
McDonald.
mean, this the provisions we're talking about are a way to sort of streamline legislation where the governor's free to change lawful provisions, and they'll take place unless we say, no, we'd like that to go through the legislative process. Is that basically where we are?
Well, I would say yes, but I'm going to look to council to make sure.
Well, council, is that basically where we are?
Yes, although I'm hesitant to characterize it exactly. The governor does have specific authority to do some things by executive order. There is a lot of language in here, and I haven't finished analyzing whether or not all of it fits within the exact authority given to him.
Well, the other one is changing the name of the agents, the police, the law enforcement from a department to an agency, which, so if they continue to do the same things they've always done, it seems to be a different case. In this case, the things that are called for in law and requirements and applications and how they're dealt with and reviewed is in this proposed order. So I thought that's what we called streamlining these days, where you didn't go through the regular process to agree to get something done. You just went and did it. And we have an opportunity to say, that's a great idea, or we don't approve. Is that basically where we're at?
Yes, so this proposal includes restructuring the personnel of the Natural Resources Board, but also who is the specific people granting the Act 250 permits.
Yeah, okay.
So first, here, the language changes the existing Natural Resources Board from a 5-member board to a 3-member board made up of 3 full-time professionals. 1 chair plus 2 additional members. The current structure of the Natural Resources Board is 5 members, 1 chair plus members who receive per diem. So they only work when the board is in session. So that is a difference.
All right, so I don't want to ask for a legal opinion on this, but it does seem interesting, I'll just say that, to read that the executive order abolishes something that's defined in statute, which seems like I don't know. Anyway, so I was surprised that, any governor could abolish a board established in statute, because it in essence seems like rewriting law. But again, I know you have more analysis work to do to figure out where the extent of those powers, and so we'll come back to it. But
that's only if we agree. No governor can do that unless we agree. So they don't have the power to do it. They have the power to do it if we think it's a good idea and we agree.
Right. But Ms. Schakowsky, isn't it true that if we have to actively disapprove in the form of a resolution, if we take no action, the change takes place? Is that right? That's what I thought the construct is.
Yeah.
I believe that is the language of the statute in 2008.
Okay.
So Ms. Schakowsky, do we have to, is it a resolution or do we pass an actual new piece of legislation that would counter this?
So I don't want to speak too in depth today on the exact legal structure, but I believe in the past a disapproval resolution can be passed
Thank you.
by either body.
And approved by both bodies? Or just one body needs to not approve?
I would prefer not to I am going to ignore, but the statute does say a disapproval resolution by either body. So I need to dig further.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator McCormick, please.
Thank you. I don't think I'm going to be telling anybody anything they don't already know. I just want to make sure my understanding is correct. The governor's authority to do this is not derived from his COVID emergency authority. It's a statutory authority. Is that correct? Correct. Okay. And he acts unilaterally only if the legislature decides to let him. If the legislature acts, we have 90 days to take action. So that if this still, it requires some kind of legislative judgment, perhaps the judgment to do nothing, but one way or another, the legislature has 90 days to decide what we want the law to be. Is that correct? Do I have that right?
No. What we don't want the law to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're confusing me, Mark. We have 90 days to make a decision in the matter.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
I was actually asking counsel, but thanks, Mark. Is that correct, Ellen?
So 3 VSA 2002, I'm going to put it up on the screen because I want to be very careful in characterizing this because it's still early. 3 VSA 2002B provides that an executive order issued under this chapter for reorganization of an executive branch shall not be issued later than January 15th. The executive order shall become effective unless disapproved by resolution of either House of the General Assembly within 90 days or before final adjournment of the annual session, whichever comes first. So that is the law that is cited in the beginning of the executive order. I do need to do more research on the precise procedure requirement, but it does say disapproved by resolution of either House of the General Assembly.
So that option is available to us. So I guess it's just the idea that deciding to do nothing is actually a decision. Deciding not to decide is in fact a decision itself.
Right.
In other words, the ball is in our court now. Am I right?
And the clock is running.
Yes, but the clock is running, and it's a legislative decision that we make. We have the power to stop this if we choose to do that.
Right. But I want to
Okay.
be fair to counsel. I only asked her to come by to sort of just tee this up so we get a copy, we could read through, and maybe if there was a little discussion just to get us rolling. But we are all whatever experienced enough that we want to go on to round 2 and 3 of questions, and we're going to have
Yeah,
to
but I
hold
want
our horses for a little while.
I want it to be clear on the process before we even begin to look at the merits. That's all. I think I am clear on that. I think I was clear anyway. I just wanted to verify that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so.
Right. So let's
Right, and
continue
I
the
just wanted to
tour.
provide you with the text. I want to stay away from providing final legal analysis on this, but that is the statutory basis for where we're going. So the board is being changed from 5-member to 3 full-time members. The current board's authority in statute is being transferred to this new 3-person board. So the chair and the 2 members are appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate, and they shall serve 6-year terms, but also serve at the pleasure of the governor. So currently the board has 4-year terms for each of the members, except for the chair who serves at the pleasure of the governor. So then the authority of the district commissions is changed. So the district commissions, their authority to decide on whether an application is a major, minor, or administrative amendment is given to the board. So then the 3-member board for each application will have 2 additional members participating in the application review. Those 2 members shall be made up from the local district commission. So, sorry, that's this one. So when a particular application comes before the board, 2 members from the district commission where the district where the application is being reviewed become voting members on the board for that application.
Which 2 members?
I'm sorry?
Which 2 members?
So it gives the authority to decide which members to the chair of the district commission. So the chair of each commission shall decide.
Thank you.
And so that means that the board will be issuing the permits as opposed to the district commissions issuing the permits.
And that's, sorry, just to make sure, and that's for the subset of applications that then stay with this higher level board?
It's for all applications.
It's for all applications.
Yeah, so the board is given the authority to review applications and decide if it's a major, minor administrative amendment. And then they review the permit application with the additional 2 district commission members.
I see. So it's not that minors and adjustments are referred back down to the district commission level.
I don't think so, but it is a little unclear, but I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
The district coordinators still retain authority to issue jurisdictional opinions, but reconsideration of those JOs now goes to the board. So most, if not all, of the district commission's actual authority goes to the board.
Yeah.
And then it transfers all of the rules, policies, and procedures over applications to the Natural Resources Board. And all these changes take place on July 1. So I think that is the high level overview of what all of the changes are.
So I just have a basic math question. I'm thinking about capacity to process. We currently have 9 district commissions, is that right? And they are 3-member boards, chair plus 2.
Yes.
So that's 27.
Plus
and there's going to be this, pardon me?
And there's alternates. Most districts have 2 or more alternates.
Okay. And now all applications would go to this higher level board, which will be 3, chair plus 2 members of that board, augmented by 2 from the district from which the application originates. Okay, so I'm just thinking aloud a little bit about how busy they may become if all permits come through them. But
So,
Senator Westman, did you have a question hand?
yeah, I did. Well, one, what it would be helpful to me is when you do your analysis, Ellen, if you could do a chart and say, here's the way it is now, here's what they're proposing. And so I can compare, because I think this sets itself up to do that. Is the 3 members viewed as all full-time now?
Yes.
Okay.
And thank you, Senator Westman. And to that point, one of the things I wanted to do, and you're reminding me, was to say, while we have counsel and she's going to be getting ready to come back and we'll have a deeper discussion. If you think of any questions that you can either share now or forward on in the time in between, that just help us get ready to have a fuller discussion when we reconvene.
Yeah, can I just say, for me, the present board isn't all full-time, correct?
Correct.
And the district commissions, I have no idea. I know that they're out there, but some of them I don't think meet more than a couple days a month.
Right. So the district commissions receive per diem based on their review and work on applications. So they are not full-time.
So I'm just trying to understand, as the question before, work volume. And now I've got 3 full-time people with full-time staff that are going to be doing that work versus something that's part-time. So I'm just trying to figure out workflow and what that would, how that would work. So somehow in that, I need help understanding that.
Sure.
And I'm not sure you're the person to do that, but I'm just saying that generally for the chair and others to hear.
Maybe it's Senator Snelling that comes in at some point, or Chair Snelling.
Yeah, or right. Well, but because I have all these part-time people all over the state that are doing, and I, if the board's going to be full-time, and I'm just that I need that to help understand the workflow.
Right. Great. And Senator McCormick, you've served on a district commission and chaired a district commission.
That's correct, yes.
So that's one commission, but do you have so we're not asking for data really, but in your experience, what's the workload like at the district commission level?
It depends on the district. It depends on how much development activity is happening. And that also changed over time. There was a stretch there where I was basically working full-time as chair of the District 3 Commission, not just on District 3, but then I would work as a substitute in District 5 because its workload was so heavy. However, there were districts that really, it's correct, they will meet maybe a few times a month. And my district, District 3, the workload went up and down. When I say I work full-time, I'm talking about a very brief period. But I pretty much always had at least 1 or 2 days a week that we did it. No one made a living at it. So
Yeah.
the per diem is not that generous.
And how are district commissions staffed?
We had a coordinator. District 2 and District 3 shared a coordinator. District 2 was down in the Brattleboro area, and District 3 was up into northern Windsor County and extended up into Orange County. And we had it's been a couple of years. The bureaucracy may have expanded, but at that time we shared. No, excuse me. I'm going to correct myself. They shared an office. They shared an administrative office. We had our own coordinator, and that was a full-time state employee, a VSEA member, making a career of it, as opposed to the board itself, which was a part-time citizen board.
And who wrote like I've read some of the JOs and stuff like that. Those seem to be fairly lengthy, detailed legal documents, finding after finding after finding, and with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in getting all those details and history right. Who writes those?
The relationship there was similar to the legislature's relationship to legislative council, which was that ultimately all the points in those memos, those documents, derived from committee discussion. And then the actual writing was done by staff, done by the coordinator. So, similarly, as a legislator, I will discuss with staff in a vernacular way what I want a bill to read like. And then legislative council writes it up with proper statutory references and so on. And it was that, so the coordinator did that work. And then as chair, the chair would work often one-on-one with the clerk, but members of the commission participated as well.
Okay, so this is one of those, thank you for that, that's helpful.
Yeah.
And this is one of those moments where I was saying on day one, what questions, this is the thinking as a group improves the thinking part, where I would like to say to the committee, like, what questions do we have and who do we want to hear from? So far we want to know what the existing structure is and what the proposed structure is, what the volume of work is and the capacity of the old versus the new system to handle that work. We want to know what the legal landscape in which these adjustments are being proposed. If I were to translate that into English, it would be something like, is this the kind of adjustment in administration that the law contemplated? And this is we're within the bounds, or this is kind of proposing to rewrite statute, and that's a generous interpretation of what's allowed under law.
Mr. Chairman, just to be responsible, the committee might want to hear from someone who is more familiar than I am with the way it all works today. The information I just gave is quite old information.
Okay. Do you have anyone you would like to propose? And you can think about that and get back to me. For instance, Ed
Yeah.
Stanek has spoken with us a number of times because I think I don't remember how recently he retired, but I think he spent 25 years doing this work, something like that. Okay.
And also, I would
there's-
just remind you that
Yeah.
the administration did make this proposal formally to House Natural last year, so they had a proposal along these lines already prepared. So I suspect they could walk you through exactly how they're envisioning the process working.
Right.
That'd be
So I'll
great.
reach out to the secretary, and I don't know if the secretary be the one to do the walkthrough, but we'll reach out to the secretary and ask for that.
So,
Senator Westman?
so since I'm new to all of these issues, but from the high level and not having been on a natural resources committee, the complaint that I hear is that each of the district commissions, depending on where you are, it's not uniform what the decisions would be across the board. How do I measure that? How, are there examples or, that different district commissions come up with different decisions based upon the same rules? And I hear my sense of what people say is it gets worse over time. How do I measure that? Part of, I know this is partly subjective, but somehow we have to take a stab at that to answer that question.
Okay.
And you
great.
guys have had more experience with this than I have, but that I'm just telling you that's what
Right. It's a good question because we know the plural of anecdotes, not data, but it's subjective. So it's hard to know. And then the other thing, by design, right? There are always local people on district commissions. So are we saying that one size fits all for the state of Vermont, or do we feel like what could be labeled inconsistency is actually an appropriate local preference being expressed? And I'm not voting one way or the other. I can see two ways of looking at it.
And I would just say it's not just the boards in that, it's that the staff in each does different things, and they the question that I would hear is someone that's in I still think of her as Senator Snelling's position is she has little authority to direct or the complaint is that it has little ability to direct the paid staff people in each position. So it's both at the staff level and at the district commission level appointed people.
Right. Okay.
Mr.
Senator
Chairman?
Campion, then Senator McCormick.
So I just want to confirm what Senator Westman's asking. In part, are you asking, how are we measuring that what's happening right now isn't working?
Well, I didn't say it isn't working, but I hear the
Measure
complaint.
that we need to make the change
Well,
for the evidence.
or is it a fact that different district commissions do different things with looking at the same statutory guidelines?
Yeah.
And do we I don't know that that's inherently bad. And it is it bad or not? How do I make that measurement to be able to, I think part of this comes out that people complain, you can be in two different commissions and get different answers. And how do we feel about that?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Right.
for that.
Senator McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer Senator Westman's point or inquiry, my understanding is going back to the actual development of Act 250 itself under Dean Davis, the work of Art Gibb, is that in that discussion that led to Act 250, there was a lot of concern about Montpelier taking away local control. And we don't need bureaucrats from Montpelier coming in and telling us what to do. It's why there are separate environmental districts in the first place, was to be sensitive to local differences. And there's an inherent contradiction between the demand for more flexibility and the demand for more predictability. It seems to me that the two work very much against one another. And the fact is that the different parts of the state are very different. I don't know if people in the Northeast Kingdom would be happy being governed out of Barry. Or Burlington for that matter. So anyway, this is an old complaint. It has always been there. But the fact is that different commissions reflect the different neighborhoods.
Yeah, I didn't say it's bad when I just don't understand how the relationship is. And I would also say to you, 50 years is a big difference.
You're very, we just had a technical glitch. What did you say, Rich?
We're 50 years out from the creation, and do the same things, are the same things at play.
Right. Well,
in
and
the
I
same
think,
way.
Well, I still hear a lot of demand for local control. I hear a lot about local control to this day.
and to Senator Westman's point about 50 years, it's not a lot of things have changed. We spent quite a bit of time on a piece of that change puzzle last year when we were looking at designated areas, because 50 years ago, there was no such thing as a designated area. And the total number of designated areas in the state is now up to something like potentially, I forget, we did a count, it could be as high as 213. So
Right.
if you start applying at any rate, and municipal planning law has grown up tremendously since that time. So it's definitely a different regulatory landscape than it was back then. So, all right, well, I don't know if this is just piquing my curiosity or I'm getting hives as we start talking about this again, but it's, so yeah, no, it's like we talked about some of these things last year, and so now we have a reason to be talking about them a little sooner than I thought, but that's what I think the EO was designed to do, was precipitate a conversation sooner rather than later.
So we basically have till the end of March. Is that correct?
I think it's April 14th is the legal cutoff, right?
Oh,
that right?
Okay.
3 months, 90 days.
February, March, April.
Well, 90 days, is that how does that get us? Okay, from yesterday, okay, that gets us to April 14th. Okay, yep.
Okay, well, great. So obviously there's plenty of things to think about and learn, and that's great. So that's why I just wanted to get the ball rolling, even though we don't know quite where we're going yet. So we'll schedule time with Ms. Chakowski on Thursday. We'll aim to do that, and then I'll invite in guests. So far we, and if people have more thoughts, let me know. But Chair Snelling, one or more people from with experience on district commissions. Ed Stanek was one. We might want to be thinking about others. Secretary Moore or someone on her staff who's the point person to explain the thinking behind the proposal. And then we'll want to understand the EO in detail, as well as start to collect some information on staffing, workflows, work levels, stuff like that. And then the consistency question, sort of a public policy question. Okay, well, great. Well, anything else that comes to mind around getting a start on this? All right.
I would only make a small plug that I believe you got the Commission on Act 250 report again this year, and it does have, it is a long report, but each of the sections do have a quick overview of some of the things we've been discussing. And I think the Commission did actually specifically consider the question of consistency between districts. And I was just trying to flip through and find it, but it is something that is a longstanding question that people have attempted to explore. So that is definitely something I think the report addresses, but also some of the other structural questions are summarized in the report.
Okay, so you're talking about not the full 3-ring binder, but just the report that's one of the early sections.
Yes, the Commission on Act 250, the next 50 years report, just the 85-page document as opposed to the 500-page document.
Okay. Could you forward that to Jude so we can repost just that report or anything else you think we might want to be considering? And then I would ask Jude to email that out to people so that they can take a look. And there's a table, I'm pretty sure I'm remembering there's a table of contents for it. So if someone wants to look for the topic, they can skip ahead. Okay.
So
Chairman McDonald?
I just ask a question I already know the answer to, or think I do. Does this proposal also include anything to do with wildlife corridors?
Not that I saw.
Is there a third executive change proposed having to do with wildlife corridors that stands by itself?
No.
Okay.
You may
So,
recall that after we left in October, there was an executive order related to recreational trails, but not wildlife corridors.
So, but thank you, Mr. Chair. Some would characterize the bill we did pass out back in September as having been a, kind of a bargain to do something the governor thought was important and something we thought was important. And the governor apparently was not comfortable with that, and vetoed that, and then used executive power to facilitate the part of that bargain that he thought was a good idea. Sometimes, well, it speaks for itself, and I guess we'll have a discussion on what's the best course of action and how we respect each other's authority and prerogatives in the weeks to come. Thank you.
Great. Yes, and as we talked about on our day one priorities, I still have the hope, and I don't know how it relates to this, that we would move a narrow Act 250 bill that would bring back forest fragmentation, fish and wildlife, let's just call it bill back provisions for their environmental impact assessment. And if it were ready from that trail group, a proposal for an alternate regulatory scheme for managing trails, since trails are very different than the average Act 250 project. So we saw how awkwardly Act 250 applied to trails. And I don't know if that work group, which is actually scheduled to deliver a proposal in March, which is too late for us, what kind of progress they will or will not make. But I could imagine that what the governor's offering might become part of a bill as well, if we thought that that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you, Ms. Schakowsky, for jumping in with very little notice and no time to really study this.
It would,
It's helped bring our questions out, and now when we read the thing, it will help us be better readers. So
it would be helpful if there was a chart, Ellen, that had now and where they want to go.
Great. Okay.
And I can see if the administration put one together last session. Otherwise, it might take me a little while to put that together.
Yeah, but this is going to be around a day or two, so just.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Well, great. Well, then, if there's nobody else has any other questions about this, then we're done for the moment with the EO. So watch your email for that report and the EO itself, and then otherwise we're done with that business, unless anyone else has some new business to bring before we adjourn for the day. Okay, so